Hello, ladies and gentlemen. In this series of videos, I am going to dive into Concept 3, Solving Proportions. In this first video specifically, I just want to detail what is a proportion, what are they good for, like what do we use proportions for, what do we use solving proportions for, and essentially what are we trying to do when we're solving a proportion. This one's a very intuitive video. In the next 3 videos, I'll be describing much more concrete procedural ways of solving proportions. So if you want to just jump ahead. If you already know what proportions are, jump ahead and start there. But let's start with that question. What is a proportion? Sorry, bumped the mic there. What is a proportion? Proportion. What is a proportion? Proportions, in the context of mathematics, are essentially this. They are 2 equivalent fractions. Proportions are just 2 equal fractions. For example, 1/2 is equal to 2/4. This is a proportion. 1/2 is equal to 2/4. 1/2 is 50%, 2/4 is 50%, and so I would say that these fractions are proportional, or they are a proportion. This is a proportion right here. 1/2 equals 2/4. Boom. They're equivalent fractions. Another example could be 6/3 is equal to 2 1s. 6/3 is equal to 2. 2 1s is equal to 2. This is a proportional expression, a proportional equation. These 2 fractions are proportional. It's a proportion because they are equal fractions. So when I'm solving proportions, essentially I'm answering this question. What number does this x need to be to make these 2 fractions equivalent? What number do I plug into x to make 6/8 equal to blank 4ths? That's what I'm trying to solve. So let's figure this out. Let's try and figure this out just intuitively. So 6/8, let's pull up the calculator real quick. Let me get it on this screen. It's on the wrong screen. 6/8, pull that back up. 6/8, 6 divided by 8 is equal to 0.75, or 75%. Is there a fraction that I know over 4 that equals 75%? 3/4, in other words. I essentially just gave it away right there. 75%, well, that's the same as saying 3/4, 3/4. So if I need this fraction over here to equal 75%, I would need to change this x into a 3. And so I would say the answer to this proportion is x equals 3. And I'd be done. That's how you solve a proportion intuitively. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to figure out what number does that letter need to be to make these fractions equivalent. Now that's well and fine, but why do we even care? Like, what's the point? Great, 2 equivalent fractions. Whoop-de-doo-da-day. Well, let's say you had a recipe for cookies. We all love cookies. Bad news, though. This recipe is only good for 2 cookies. Oh, man. And let's say it calls for 2 cups of flour and 1/2 cup of butter. You know, it has a bunch of these things. It goes on and on. But it's only good for, that's a lot of flour. So those are some big cookies, by the way. But what if you had 14 friends coming over? What if you had like a big party, a party of people coming over? Well, I need to find some way to figure out how much flour I would need to make 14 cookies. That's where proportions come in. We could make this into a proportional problem. We could say, hey, it takes 2 cups of flour for 2 cookies. how many cups of flour do I need for 14 cookies? And just like that, we have a very similar setup right here, right? A known fraction, a semi-known fraction, a known fraction, a semi-known fraction. So this is where proportions are used in life. They're used to take numbers and either make them bigger or make them smaller, but to keep the proportions, to keep the amounts, to keep the ratios, to keep the fractions the same, to be consistent. You'll use this in math, you'll use this in engineering, you'll use this in structural design, you'll use this in cooking. I use it a lot in cooking, to tell you the truth. So this is where it has purpose. There you have it, folks. That's what proportions are. Equivalent fractions. This is what it means to solve them. Find the number that needs to be plugged in to make these fractions equivalent. And here's how we use them. Most commonly in cooking. Until I see you again, ta-ta for now.